I was just some small hick kid, rancher that didn't know really anything about the world. I just thought that, hey, this is my chance to do what I want to do. I'm joining the Marine Corps to go to war, so this is the best opportunity and, fight for my country. And of course, being a dumb kid that wanted to do it and just kill somebody, I think I wanted to be the first kid in my town to actually be like, yeah, I killed somebody for my country.
Even when you spend the better part of your adolescence dreaming about warfare and your teens preparing for it, there still is an unnavigable distance between theory and practice, especially when there isn't even a war on. You attack enemies that aren't just phantasms, but phantasms without nationality or goal, just representatives of the vague threat you're trying to thwart. But when the war and the enemy are real, it is nothing like you possibly could have imagined. Zebulon Jensen joined the Marines to fight, to have adventures, and to serve his country in the best way he knew how at the time. But even as prepared for war as he thought he was, there is so much more to being a Marine than just killing and dying. There is a responsibility to other Marines to be support, but also to stand witness.
So smoked my first cigarette ever in my life, and it's just kind of space, because you don't realize that's real life. Like, you're just like, wow, this is how I'm feeling right now. One of my buddies is dead, possibly because of me, because I missed that IED.
What is true bravery? What makes a hero a hero? Tested by the worries of what's happening at home, thousands of miles away, and the reality of what you're facing here and now. When your life is in danger every second, and it's either kill or be killed. From Wondery and Incongruity Media, this is Anthony Russo, and this is War. When you're running a business, you want to try and be smart. Do you know what's not smart? Hiring your relatives to fill in at work while you look for staff. But do you know what is smart? Going to ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar to hire the right person. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you, it finds them for you. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes, identifies people with the right skills, education, and experience for your job, and then actively invites them to apply. So you get qualified candidates fast. That's why ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the US. This rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with over 1,000 views. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. That's ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Zebulon Jensen joined a war that, to his disappointment, was already over as far as he knew. He had planned on graduating early from school so that he could get into the fight, but it just wasn't meant to be. By the time he landed in Iraq as a weapons company machine gunner in the summer of 2004, he worried that he was only going to be part of a police action.
I think what was going on is the Iraqis were kind of just scoping out and kind of reading what we do. Me, I was kind of like, they're not going to want to play. They just get their asses kicked if they want to shoot at us, so why would they do that?
Jensen had been training to be a Marine for most of his childhood. Growing up in Nevada, he and his buddies would build pipe bombs and pretend they were mines. They would hunt and shoot silhouettes and generally turn the outskirts of his father's Nevada ranch into a private war zone. When he was a freshman in high school, he signed up for a Marine boot camp-style summer program that most of the other participants were actually sentenced to. He was preparing to go to war in a world where one didn't even exist yet. His parents thought it was just a phase, something he would grow out of as he approached his junior year of high school.
I think they thought it was more of a rebellion, and I was just gonna push them and say things. They didn't really think of it until 2001. I think I was a junior in high school when the World Trade Center 9/11 happened, and then it got serious and real after that, because my whole life I'm like, if I'm gonna join the Marines, I want to go to war and fight for my country and be loyal and honor and hopefully get something out of life than just be a little farm boy out of a small town. I think when I brought it up to my mom, it's been so long ago, but I told her, I'm like, hey, talk to a recruiter and I'm gonna join up for the Marine Corps once I get out of high school. And she kind of just looked at me like, you're not gonna stay at the ranch and work the rest of your life? So she was kind of baffled, but was supportive. Old man, he wasn't really into it. He's kind of one of those old school cowboys that, you know, hey, I brought you into this world. I gave you this great opportunity to your work values, your discipline, and you kind of owe me this to work and take over my legacy of this ranch, 160,000 acres and 1,300 cows that everybody wants to have, and work with me until I die. And then he wanted to make it a family thing where, you know, we stay at the ranch and work.
3 years later, Jensen was on top of a Humvee, clipping through the desert at 40 miles per hour and scanning the area for threats with his 50 cal. He was communicating his threat assessments to the Marines inside. He had imagined coming to Iraq as a Force Recon Marine and had passed the physical requirements but was just shy on the aptitude test. His plan now was to get a combat tour under his belt, retake the test, and spend the rest of his life as a Marine fighter.
It was a city called Karma. Drove through there, and there was a vehicle on the side of the road with the hood up, gas can. I was the first vehicle, so I go and look at the vehicle while I'm on the gunner seat in the Humvee, and it's just a broke down vehicle. If it would have blown up, it would have blown up by now, and I would be dead, so I think we're good to go. But what we didn't know is the Iraqis would always, you know, penetrate the middle vehicle. So we blow past it, second vehicle blows past it, looks at it, and then the third vehicle, which had the engineers, of course, it big old boom, blow up. And I just remember, like, oh man, this is actually real shit. They actually do want to kill us still. Okay, well maybe we'll get some. Maybe this is for real. This is not over yet. Right when that explosion hit and I felt it and the backblast, I knew it was that vehicle. And I just remember telling myself, I'm like, fuck, that was an IED and I missed it. I didn't even tell it was an IED. Like, these guys are legit. This is a real thing.
The attack weighed on Jensen. He always had been the kind of Marine who looked out for the others. He had gone into boot camp as a selfish kid, but by the time he and the rest of his cadre had reached the Crucible, the final challenge before finishing boot camp, Jensen had learned that being a strong Marine means looking out for his brothers, helping them succeed, and keeping them safe.
Going up Mount Motherfuckers, what they called it, with a 70-pound pack, rifle in your hand, and just seeing guys just kind of fall behind. So I remember, going and falling behind with them, pushing them, grabbing their rifle. There was this young kid, same as me, but he was Asian, and he was just a little guy, probably 100 pounds at max. And he's hiking up the same amount of weight as I am, and he's having a lot of trouble. Just, hey, let me take your rifle, let me kind of give you a little shove, let me give you some motivation, and get up there, you're gonna do it, or we're all gonna fall back. I just remember getting up to the top and having, I think, like 4 rifles, and I remember my drill instructor's like, oh, really, Recruit Jensen, you're just gonna freaking be soft and help these weak ones? And I'm like, no, sir, they're this recruit's friends. I want them to succeed just as much as I want to succeed. And seeing that in his eyes, it brought a lot of pride. Through my whole life, I didn't see, a lot of pride, and I knew I was like in the right place.
Jensen had never let other Marines down before, but one of the things that he would learn in Iraq is that there is no amount of desire to protect that can keep people safe in a war zone. It is impossible to eliminate or even account for every possible threat. As the tour wore on, he would get better at scanning the roads with his 50 cal, looking for potential threats near and far, assessing them, and making the call. He brought all the experience and wisdom a 19-year-old overachiever could to the battlefield.
We're the first vehicle. I got the 50 cal, and there's a big grass trailer, and then a bunch of farmers to the right of it, cutting hay down and then putting it in the trailer. and then a donkey on that trailer. I'm like, okay, they're just doing women and children out there. They're just doing farm work. My job is to recognize if it's an IED or not. A donkey with a trailer full of hay and a bunch of farmers to the right, women and children. You know, my mind's like, well, they're not going to risk their own people to hurt us.
The thing is, there's always something more to learn about IEDs. It was as glorious a job as you could have in Iraq. By mid-2004, the Marines were getting a handle on the roadside bombs, but just as they were experimenting with combating these attacks, the insurgents were working on new, deadlier ways of deploying them. So Marines routinely made judgment calls about the relative safety of passing trash and traffic. And that's the toughest part about it. If you successfully avoid one, no one knows. If you don't, everyone does. After a careful scan of the area, Jensen reported to the vehicle commander below.
I don't think they blow up their donkey, so I don't think it's an IED. He's like, roger that. And then the next thing we know, the biggest explosion that I've ever felt, and still to this day, of being hit by IEDs, because it put a crater in there that was probably 30 by 30 and 5 feet deep.
The chaos that follows an IED that massive puts even the most well-trained Marines on edge. But in this case, there was a wrinkle that both elevated the confusion and the danger. The Humvee that was blown up was carrying emergency fuel for the convoy in addition to the tow gun, essentially a rocket launcher. The diesel caught as the truck kept moving and flipped on its side, separating it and Jensen's crew from the rest of the convoy. The second Humvee also held a platoon commander. Without orders and, really, without any kind of protocol for this attack, Jensen was left to his own devices. You know what's not smart? Job sites that overwhelm you with tons of the wrong resumes. But you know what is smart? ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't wait for candidates to find you. ZipRecruiter finds them for you. Its powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes, identifies people with the right skills, education, and experience for your job, and actively invites them to apply, so you get quality candidates fast. No more sorting through resumes, no more waiting for the right candidates to apply. It's no wonder ZipRecruiter was rated #1 by employers in the US. This rating comes from sites on Trustpilot with over 1,000 views. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. That's ZipRecruiter.com/THISISWAR. ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Zebulon Jensen hadn't been in Iraq for long before missing an IED that blew up a bunch of combat engineers. Weeks later, another misjudgment, and another explosion. The only thing that was different this time, though, was that he thought he had a chance to do something about it.
The 3 Marines that were in that Humvee got out. One was the doc, and he was hit, got shrapnel in his shoulder. The other was our platoon sergeant, which he was messed up. And then the driver, they pulled the platoon sergeant out. But then there was one more guy, and it was Corporal Ranamaki, and he's in the tow gun. Marines are screaming, yelling. We can't get Ranamaki out. He's still in the vehicle. And I'm looking over, and the Humvee's half on fire on the backside, just in flames. So I jumped out, got off my gun, jumped off the top of the Humvee, trying to be, I don't know, superhero, and fell right on my ass. All that weight and armor, I just scratched up my nose and my face, just skidding across the highway. Got up, ran to the driver's side. I open the door, and then I try to yell at Ranamaki. I see him laying there, and I'm trying to grab him, but as I'm trying to grab him, I just feel all the heat from the fire from the back of the Humvee just pushing me back, and just so hot, like I couldn't even stand it. I go back and around the front of the Humvee. I see his hen helmet, and I start grabbing his flak jacket, which has 2 straps, and I just start pulling. and pulling, and finally I was just like, he's not getting loose. So I put both of my legs against the vehicle, and just all my might just started pulling, and finally he broke free.
He was still 30 meters from cover when the rounds in the Humvee started cooking off. At first, Jensen thought it was an ambush. Then the tow missile misfired and came skidding past him, and he understood that, although there were bullets flying, they weren't being shot at him. Either way, his focus was on closing that 30-meter distance and getting him and Renamaki to cover. The doc's wounds were superficial, and he came over to assess Renamaki's.
So I flip Renamaki over, and this is like what you see in the movies. His face is caved in. You know, his pants at that time are on fire that I didn't notice. And I have just blood all over my flak jacket and my camis. And I just remember looking at him like, oh God, is this real? Like, and I drop him, he slams his head, and I just kind of was stunned there, like looking at him like, oh fuck, he's fucking dead. And the doc comes over and he's like, yeah, call it, we're calling it, he's done. Now, I wasn't a paramedic at that time, so I didn't know about agonal breathing, but when your body dies, it still sends impulses, so he starts gasping. He has no jaw, he has nothing, but I hear him trying to gasp. And that just made me more crazy, because I'm like, oh fuck, he's still alive. You know, that made me even more freaked out, because I'm like, we gotta save him, you know, I'm going crazy, like, Doc, he's still alive. And Doc's trying to get the chaos, and it's like, no, you know, that's agonal breathing, man, he's dead, just call it, we gotta figure out these other Marines.
There's an absurdity about it. When would you bet your life, or anyone else's, that an insurgent wouldn't blow up a donkey? What young Marine could make that call and still press on in the face of being wrong? But these were the hard lessons the ground forces were learning as the war in Iraq marched on. There was no rhyme or reason tactically behind the insurgent attacks. The prime directive was to kill or wound U.S. soldiers. If it cost Iraqi lives, the price was worth paying, and that was the disconnect. Under constant orders to protect civilian lives and the retaliatory restraint that was supposed to come with it, it was easy enough to fall into believing that the rules of engagement were universal, that non-combatants never intentionally would be targets. But in the weeks leading up to the Second Battle of Fallujah, it was clear that that wasn't the case. Taking civilian lives into account was not a good indicator of whether an attack was imminent. As the Marines readied themselves to take Fallujah, their response to attacks became a lot less measured.
There was a Marine Humvee that got hit up in Karma. It wounded a bunch of Marines, didn't kill anybody. We got task force out there to Karma. Basically, we had intent to occupy the city and shoot anybody and anything that we felt was possibly a hostile intent. Well, at that point, we're just like, no, you blow us up, we're going to fuck up everything that's around us. They sent up half of the battalion out there, and we basically pushed from that highway that got hit by the Humvee through the city of Karma. And I remember driving by with the lightning storm rain, and this was the very first rainstorm, thunderstorm I've ever experienced in Iraq. And it was like one of the most beautiful things I've ever saw with the lightning. And you're in the desert and you finally get some rain. It felt good, but the hostile intent from Marines was 100-fold.
Karma was an insurgent hotspot and would remain so throughout the war. For example, when Fallujah was under siege, insurgents in Karma smuggled weapons and aid into the city. The insurgents hadn't expected this level of retaliation for the bombing, and they were on their heels when the Marines rolled in. Taking Karma was ugly, and the occupation of it in the weeks leading up to Fallujah were uglier still. But it had to be secured street by street, and there was a near constant resistance. Even once the shooting stopped, the hostility thickened the air and hung over every confrontation between the occupiers and the occupied.
We threw a lot of checkpoints through the roads, concertina wire, everything, and basically you had a kill zone. It's hostile intent, and light everything up. And I remember when we got there, we went through an alleyway, and there was a big dump truck that was driving down the road, and he was not knowing what was going on probably. and he was not slowing down at all to see our checkpoint. So at that point, we take 2 pop shots at the ground to let him know we're here, and then if he crosses that line, we light him up.
The driver might have been drunk. It wouldn't have been the first time that the Marines ran into a drunk driver, but as the dump truck continued barreling toward them, the question of whether the driver was too drunk to know what was going on faded. He ignored the warning volley, choosing instead to duck down behind the wheel and keep coming. The Marines on the ground began shooting through the windshield, and the truck continued on. Jensen had been exercising caution to the extreme throughout all of the IED attacks the Marines had endured. 6 months into a tour that he was almost certain would be extended, he was all out of patience and caution when it came to potential threats. As the vehicle commander ordered the Humvee forward, pushing through first an abandoned car and then through the line of firing Marines, Jensen was ready.
I remember seeing the guy drop down, laying down on the seat from like his windshield, and I remember just putting 300 rounds down the center mass of that dump truck through the engine block, and I knew that he's going to get hit. So I just start firing and going all out, just lighting everything up. I stopped firing because my sergeant kept on hitting me on the leg like cease fire. You know, the wording of pink mist, you know what I'm talking about. And I knew that he was getting lit up and those rounds were going through the engine block, hitting him. Even if he was down below the seat, he had no way of living. And I think that was the first kill I ever had.
The thing was, Jensen had finagled his way into this position precisely because he thought it offered the best chance to see combat. After boot camp, when he was assigned to be a machine gunner for a different company, he lied his way into weapons company. That was where the action was for machine gunners. At least, that was what he'd been told. What mattered to him was to get into that action. He wanted to fight. He had been planning on a scenario very much like this since he was home in Nevada, playing Marine with his friends and imagining what being a Marine would be like.
Being a kid, you don't know anything. Like I said, I was just some small hick kid, rancher that didn't know really anything about the world. I just thought that, hey, this is my chance to do what I want to do. I'm joining the Marine Corps to go to war, so this is the best opportunity, and was pleased. At that moment, I was like, okay, this is, I'm not going to join the Marines and just go on, tours to Thailand and Australia, which I wanted to do, but I'm actually going to go to war and actually, hopefully, see some combat, fight for my country, and of course, being a dumb kid that wanted to do it and just kill somebody, I think I wanted to be the first kid in my town to actually know and be like, yeah, I killed somebody for my country, I fought for my country and for this right and freedom.
Having decided very pointedly to kill the truck driver wasn't quite what he imagined it would be. It had all the earmarks of a heroic kill. In fact, it truly was. Marines were saved. Civilians were saved. Jensen had faced down the enemy, as he might say, with hate and discontent. He lived up to the expectations he had for himself and for his duty. But he had tapped into a rage that had been building for months. Since that very first IED on the road to Karma, right after his arrival. Once he let it out, he would carry it with him until well after he was back in Nevada.
And I just remember just being, just hated everything around me. That was like a kind of a dark time in my Marine Corps career that, if he was a civilian, too bad, if he was a bad guy, oh, thank God. But I still don't know to this day if he was an IED or, vehicle-borne IED or what, or if he was just some kind of drunk truck driver going down the road in the wrong place, wrong time.
What started out as the temporary pacification of Karma morphed into the earliest feints preceding the Battle of Fallujah. There had been rumors pretty much since he landed that the Marines would eventually take the city, but once their tour was officially extended, it wasn't hard to guess why. In the weeks that followed, Jensen and the rest of the Marines juked in and out of position, feigning the beginning of the assault on Fallujah. As it turned out, Jensen was already in the perfect frame of mind for what was to come. If he had aggression, he would have plenty of opportunity to give it voice. In interviewing members of the military for this program, one of the books that comes up time and time again is War by Sebastian Junger. The book is an on-the-ground account of a 15-month tour of duty in Afghanistan. It really has connected with a lot of my listeners. War is among the unmatched selection of books available at audible.com/thisiswar. Audible helps you listen to more books by letting you switch seamlessly between devices, picking up exactly where you left off. Whether it's on your phone or through your car, from a tablet, or at home on Amazon Echo, you can get through tons of books, hands and eyes free, while doing almost anything. Plus, in addition to its dizzying selection of audiobooks, Audible content includes original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, magazine and newspaper publishers, and business information providers. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audible.com/thisiswar and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audible.com/thisiswar or text thisiswar to 500-500 to get started today. That's audible.com/thisiswar. audible.com/THISISWAR. Or text THISISWAR to 500-500 so you can get started today. Audible.com/thisiswar. Jensen and the rest of the Marines had been in Iraq a little more than 5 months before the feints started. Marines would set up to push south into the city, establish checkpoints, occasionally engage in a firefight, and just generally make their presence known. The idea was to get a sense of where the enemy was setting up, and to draw them south in anticipation for an attack that eventually would come from the north.
I would shoot, they would shoot. This is all like a mile away, like contact. So, I'd see, a van drive up north, people get out, kind of rush in. And we wouldn't be able to fire until we actually started getting mortar rounds landing by us and or missiles they'd shoot at us. And I remember the backblast a mile away because I was looking at it by the white van, and then that distinct sound of the missile going and just getting louder and louder. I'm like, oh shit, that's getting close, and you can't see it when it's going right directly towards you. And I just remember it going over my head. I know it was close enough where I could feel the kind of heat off the top of my neck and how it passed us. We talked to, my first sergeant in charge, which is in my Humvee, First Sergeant Castle. You probably know the name. And he said, just light them up, Jensen. So I remember just zipping my 50 cal over and just probably putting about 1,000 rounds in that white van.
Sergeant Bradley Castle would receive the Navy Cross for his actions saving other Marines after he was wounded in what became known as the House of Hell early on in Operation Phantom Fury, which began on November 7th, 2004.
It was cold, rainy, and we basically stood by, and I remember just being all ghettoed out in every warm weather gear a Marine could have. Watching the fireworks show, staying up all night, not having any sleep, and then that morning, once the sun started coming up, they detonated the whole train tracks and then said, here we go, kill everything in sight, guns free. It didn't really hit me until we started getting right into the city, and it was just quiet as can be. Like, I just remember the hairs back of my neck just standing up. I'm like, oh fuck. Please, if I do get shot, just let it be in the head so I don't feel anything and I'm just lights out. I just remember telling myself, like, please just...
It's an odd but a very Marine thought to have. If I'm going to die, just let it be quick. No fuss, no loss of resources and having to listen to my own screams. Fallujah stands on its own as a mythic battle because of the deeds and the sacrifices the US military made. But it's important to remember that it already was kind of a mythic battle before the first shot was fired. This wasn't an expedition. The US wasn't planning on trying to take the city and falling back if unsuccessful. This was a literal do-or-die mission, and everyone knew it.
2 days before the push through Fallujah, I call my mom. She answers. I'm not sure what time it was in Nevada. She kind of answered the phone. I'm like, "Hey, Mom, glad you answered." She's like, "Yeah, I normally don't pick up because, a sat phone, it's a weird number." I'm like, "Hey, I just want to tell you, you're not going to be hearing from me for about 2-3 weeks because we're doing something, big, maybe secret or something like that. Just want to let you know I'm okay, and just you're not going to hear from me in 2 weeks." She's like, "You're going through Fallujah, aren't you?" I'm like, How do you know?" She's like, "It's all over the news." So I think even the people in America knew before us. Marine Corps saying is first to go, last to know kind of thing.
Riding into town weapons free, though, for the first time since he landed in Iraq, and especially since he knew what the 50 cal could do, Jensen turned his focus away from life and death thoughts. He either would take a bullet through the head or return home. Neither outcome was going to break his focus as he headed into Fallujah.
50 cal is kind of a good weapon because once you fire through a wall in one of those, concrete buildings, if it goes through the wall, it starts tumbling and then it'll start ricocheting off all the other walls, and you have a better percentage of killing anybody that's in that building. They tell me to take out a building that there's Hajis on the second floor. I just light that entire building up with 50 cal rounds, and hopefully I got a kill, or hopefully I took him out. There's no way of telling. Guys were really smart. They didn't do a lot of running around on the streets. They kind of were up on top of the buildings and jumping from rooftop to rooftop or tunnels. So it was really a confusing, not what you were thinking about when you were going to go take Fallujah, where you could go and a guy would be in the middle of the street shooting at you and you could just shoot him back. It was way different than what I expected. It was a lot of just looking right, left, and trying to make myself the smallest kind of person in that little crow's nest as I possibly could, so if they did take a shot, it would be a small target.
The Marines lost 4 or 5 gunners in the first few days, but information like that didn't really travel. Inside the city, Marines were taking one house at a time. At the House of Hell, 4 of them had been wounded and were trapped when Castle and another Marine went in to extract them. They took fire and themselves were wounded. According to reports, Castle refused rescue, thinking he was mortally wounded, and provided cover as the rest of the Marines were saved. All told, 10 Marines were killed and 1 wounded in that battle.
We were the first ones to get to that building with all those Marines in it. And I remember getting there and all just kinds of gunfire going off in that building, and I'm just clenching my gun, like asking everybody, "Hey, can I shoot up top?" And just because the bad guys are up on the second floor. Well, of course, everybody's worried about blue on blue, not noticing, and there's all kinds of chaos. So I think after that whole situation, and one of our Marines, Sergeant Norwood, got killed, our commander of our battalion, Colonel Buell, was like, "Okay, if we get any hostile intent in any building, we're just going to back off and throw a 500-pound bomb into it, or we're going to get one of these D9 dozers and just knock the buildings down."
By the second week in November, the fighting had become sporadic. U.S. forces had more than 50 killed and 400 wounded after this first push. By the time the city was considered pacified on December 23rd, the total killed was 95, with 560 wounded. Word came through that they were going home, and Jensen had never heard such good news. On the flight home, he couldn't think of anything that would make him as happy as to be back on the ranch at home. But when he arrived, everything felt flat, one-dimensional.
You don't know you have something until you don't have it for 7, 8, 9 months, and you're in hell, and everything is just heaven other than that. So constantly thinking about, what are you going to do? Can't wait till I get in that formation and I can see my family and give them hugs, and that's going through your brain constantly through war. And then we fly back. I was just kind of numb. I was kind of like, oh, okay, this wasn't as cool as I thought, whatever. Anyway, hey, yeah, nice to see you. Cool. I feel bad now that, my family, all the stress they had, my mom especially, and I get back, give her a hug and say, okay, goodbye, I'm getting drunk with my buddies. I think that looking back at it was kind of a selfish thing to do, but that's all you know. You're with your brothers and, you lose 33 guys in your battalion and, you get this really good in-depth family that's closer than your actually real family, which is weird to say, but you want to see them. You think about it the whole time in Iraq, and you get back and you're just like, oh, this is just another day.
Being on a combat tour can induce a special kind of homesickness. When you spend months at a time being either mind-numbingly bored or engaged in life and death situations, it's easy to fantasize about life back home. Being able to watch TV, to see your family and friends whenever you feel like it, choose and eat pretty much anything you want for dinner, pining away for it can help gloss over how dreadfully mundane regular life can be. But it's one of those things you can never unsee. Beyond that, Jensen had been changed by his experience. He was distant from his family and his girlfriend, breaking up his regular nights out drinking with other Marines with being distant, irritable, or aggressive. The worst part was, the same things that took the shine out of civilian life also took the shine out of military life for him when he went back to Iraq.
It had a lot to do with politics, higher-ups. There's a lot of great higher-ups that had to go and do different assignments. And then we got new higher-ups that just came out of like drill instructor school or recruiting school and just had the rank and had no knowledge of war. And it had a lot to do with me. I was just some 21-year-old, thought my shit didn't stink and I could take the world, and having this recruiter or drill instructor telling me what to do that never seen war, I just didn't fit right with me. So I had an attitude going into it.
As the tour wore on, things just kept getting worse. There was an incident where Jensen disobeyed a direct order from one of the new staff sergeants about how to respond to an IED attack. Then, of course, there was the general morale hit the Marines took after Haditha. They felt attacked and abandoned by the higher-ups. The final straw for Jensen was infidelity back home. It's the kind of thing everyone jokes about until it happens to them. In the face of what seemed like betrayal from all sides, Jensen kept his head down, finished his tour, and headed back to his parents' Nevada ranch to brood and to get his head straight. It took a lot longer than he thought it would.
I went drinking a lot and driving, got a DUI, transitioning over. The whole world was kind of not going too well. During that time, I was still in the stages like, I'm not going to be that guy that something's wrong with them. I'm okay. I'm not fucked up in the head. I'm everybody else. They just want to say that just because I was in war. So it took a year at the ranch, kind of just doing ranch work.
For a long time, and it still persists today, there's this kind of black and white attitude toward emotional residue left over from war. Civilians and military alike can be ginger when discussing PTSD because it conjures up madness, pity, victimhood, or cowardice. Plus, no one wants to think they have a disorder, especially when it's just an occasional nightmare, or a shorter than normal fuse, or low-grade anxiety. Jensen dried out for a couple of years, and that helped, but there was still an incompleteness in his life that he had to address.
You go through all these girlfriends, and everybody's just like, oh, here's Zeb with another girlfriend, and she's gonna break up with him because he's too fucking crazy or stupid, and trying to hold a good girl because I'm doing crazy shit or having nightmares at night and not be able to hold, have my good emotions. And then actually getting that turning point where I met my wife and be like, okay, well, she is one in a million and I got to keep her, so what do I got to do to not screw this up? Did counseling, which helped out a lot, and never talked about Iraq or anything or Fallujah to anybody until I started seeing a counselor. Everything started shedding off me, like all the misery and all the guilt that I thought that maybe it was my fault for these Marines dying and all that stuff.
It's a weird place to be. Setting aside the Marine adapt and overcome attitude, there's still an obstacle many Marines have of knowing guys who had it worse than them. Objectively, civilian life is less exciting, less immersive, and less participatory than military life. There are excellent reasons to chalk up the tension and anger to boredom or being a fish out of water. But even after he quit drinking for a while, Jensen couldn't connect as well as he wanted with other people. He found his solution in that desire, though, to be a member of a new tribe, an additional one maybe. It wouldn't supplant his having been a combat Marine, but it could fill the mental space the separation had left.
We had most out respect for our corpsmen, so I'm like, I'm going to be a paramedic or an EMT. You know, going to school again and meeting some firefighters. And I'm like, oh, this is a cool gig. This is like the Marines kind of, but not all the ugly, nasty humor and killing. You're actually saving people. This might be good. Finally, after 5 years of, testing, I scored the best job in the world as a firefighter paramedic. Very lucky from where I was when I got out to where I am now. I tell everybody, they're like, would you change anything that you know now? And I'm like, no. I did some bad stuff. I did some great stuff. And it's made me the man I am today. And with the experiences and going to a different country and seeing how they live and being happy and, honored to live in America, that changes you. And I think it changed me for a good reason.
There's a certain heroism tied up in the allure of becoming a Marine. This notion of self-sufficiency, of being there for other Marines and shouldering the burden together. But no one joins the Marines with the idea that being part of that brotherhood means receiving aid, only providing it. Through the process, though, through the deployments and the close quarters and the training, Marines come to get a sense of the wider brotherhood, of the obligations and responsibilities, sure, but also of the network of strangers that become family. Finding a way forward often just means finding a better way to recover that feeling that you're part of something larger, a community that you can support and be supported by, if you can muster the will to access it. Are you a combat veteran, or do you know one with a story to tell? Reach out to us at stories@thisiswar.com with your dates and branch of service, as well as a brief description of the experience that you would like to share. If you like the show, you can help support us by visiting our sponsors or by leaving a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. This Is War was written by me, Anthony Russo, and produced by Incongruity Media. Executive producer Hernan Lopez for Wondery.